Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Mystery Channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring the strange and enduring mystery of mermaids. For centuries, people have claimed that human-like beings existed deep beneath the sea. Many of these stories sound like simple fairy tales, but some were recorded by eyewitnesses who truly believed they saw something real. What makes the mystery so compelling is how common these sightings are around the world. Different cultures throughout history developed their own explanations. Some descriptions became legends, while others were treated as serious reports. Even today, unusual sightings still make us wonder about what's hiding in the ocean. Could some of these stories preserve memories of real encounters? Could an unknown creature have helped create the mermaid legend? Or have generations of people simply interpreted the same mystery in different ways? If you enjoy these curious journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders relax and notice your eyes grow heavy. And as the day begins to gently fade away, join me as we explore the mystery of mermaids together. Let's begin. Mermaid stories have appeared all over the world and all throughout history. One of the strangest things about mermaid traditions is how widely they developed. Communities separated by enormous distances told stories about beings that seemed partly human and partly aquatic. The details were never identical, which makes the pattern even more intriguing. In some traditions, these beings were dangerous. In others, they could marry humans or reveal hidden knowledge. They were sometimes treated as spirits, but elsewhere, people spoke about them almost as though they were unusual animals. Similar ideas emerged around coastlines where direct contact with distant civilizations would have been difficult or impossible. Conventional explanations suggest that humans naturally create similar stories when faced with the same mysterious ocean. Another possibility is that sailors carried such legends farther than surviving records can prove. The more unusual suggestion is that different societies may have encountered something real. Whatever the explanation, the recurring image of a human-like being from the water appeared with remarkable persistence across the ancient world. Christopher Columbus reported strange sea women during his first voyage to the Americas. During his voyage through the Caribbean in the late 15th century, Columbus wrote about seeing 3 creatures rise from the sea. He described them as female in appearance, although he added that they were not as beautiful as artists usually portrayed mermaids. Historians generally identify the animals as manatees. That explanation sounds reasonable until the circumstances are considered more closely. Columbus was an experienced sailor who had spent years watching marine animals. Yet what he saw reminded him strongly enough of familiar mermaid traditions that he recorded the comparison. Manatees can lift their heads above water, and from a moving ship, their forelimbs may create a vaguely human impression. Still, the episode raises an entertaining question about earlier sailors. If experienced crews could interpret manatees as human-like creatures, perhaps many mermaid stories began the same way. Or perhaps the manatee explanation became convenient because no stranger creature was available. The original sighting remains one of history's most famous encounters with supposed sea women. Ancient sailors described human-like ocean beings centuries before the modern mermaid existed. Long before fairy tales gave mermaids their familiar appearance, sailors were already reporting beings that seemed to combine human and marine features. Ancient Mediterranean writers described strange inhabitants of the sea with bodies that did not fit ordinary categories. These accounts mattered because the ocean was still largely unknown. A creature reported beyond the horizon could not easily be checked or dismissed. Sailors returned with descriptions of animals that sounded impossible to people on land. Some of those creatures later proved to be perfectly real. Whales, giant rays, and enormous squid all seemed fantastical to societies that rarely encountered them. That history leaves room for speculation. Perhaps early reports of sea people were simply distorted observations of unfamiliar animals. Perhaps storytellers added human features over generations. Yet some descriptions were presented as eyewitness claims rather than mythology. For people fascinated by unexplained history, that distinction is important. It suggests that the mermaid tradition may have grown partly from encounters that ancient observers genuinely believed had happened. Some researchers believe real marine animals inspired surprisingly consistent mermaid encounters. The strongest conventional explanation for mermaids begins with creatures such as manatees and dugongs. Both are large marine mammals that sometimes rise vertically in the water. Their forelimbs can resemble arms from a distance, and females nurse their young near the chest. To an exhausted sailor watching through mist or glare, the resemblance could become stronger than it seems in a modern photograph. This theory explains several historical sightings without requiring an unknown species. Yet it also creates another puzzle. Many eyewitness descriptions include long hair, expressive faces, or movements unlike those of any Sirenian. Some reports came from colder waters where manatees and dugongs would be highly unlikely. That does not prove anything extraordinary, but it weakens a single explanation for every case. Some people suspect that different animals contributed to different traditions. Others wonder whether one unidentified creature became mixed with known species in later retellings. The mystery may therefore involve several origins rather than one simple mistake repeated across history. The famous Fiji mermaid convinced thousands that an unknown sea creature existed. When the Fiji mermaid reached American audiences in the 19th century, people were promised evidence that creatures from old maritime legends might actually exist. What they encountered was not a graceful woman with a fishtail. The specimen was small, twisted, and disturbingly unfamiliar. It appeared to combine the upper body of a primate with the lower body of a fish. Showman P.T. Barnum promoted it brilliantly and encouraged public argument over whether it was genuine. Experts who examined similar objects later concluded that such specimens were manufactured curiosities. Many were created in Asia by attaching parts from different animals. Yet the episode reveals something important about mermaid belief. Audiences did not need the creature to resemble a beautiful fairy tale figure. They were willing to consider that a real mermaid might look completely different from popular art. The hoax succeeded because the possibility of unknown ocean life already felt plausible. That uncertainty made even an obviously strange specimen difficult to ignore. Japanese temples have preserved mysterious ningyo remains claimed to belong to mermaid-like beings. Japan developed its own tradition of aquatic humanoids known as ningyo. Unlike the elegant mermaids of Western art, these beings were often described as unsettling fish-like creatures with strangely human features. Over time, several preserved specimens appeared in temples and private collections. Some were treated as religious objects or mysterious relics rather than simple carnival attractions. Their origins were often uncertain. Many surviving examples appear to have been assembled from ordinary animal remains by skilled craftsmen. Even so, their cultural importance goes beyond whether the objects themselves were genuine. People associated ningyo with prophecy, unusual fortune, and events that could change entire communities. In some stories, capturing one could bring trouble rather than fame. The preserved bodies became physical anchors for legends that were already centuries old. For alternative thinkers, the intriguing possibility is that manufactured specimens may have copied something once believed to be real. If so, the fake relics might preserve the appearance of a creature that nobody can now identify. Witnesses have reported mermaid-like creatures far beyond the places famous for mermaid folklore. Mermaid reports are not limited to a handful of European fishing villages or tropical islands. Stories have emerged from cold northern waters, inland lakes, major rivers, and remote coastlines with very different cultural histories. That distribution creates a difficult problem for anyone searching for a single origin. If every account came from one region, cultural borrowing would provide an easy explanation. Instead, human-like water beings appear in places where the surrounding folklore developed along separate paths. In some cases, the witnesses already knew mermaid stories. In others, the local creature had a different name and very different behavior. Skeptics point out that water naturally encourages similar fears and imaginative ideas. Humans everywhere may simply invent human-like inhabitants for environments they cannot easily explore. Yet believers see the geography differently. They argue that a widespread phenomenon might produce widespread legends. Neither interpretation can be proved from folklore alone. What remains striking is that the basic idea keeps resurfacing wherever people spend generations watching mysterious water. Several governments have recorded unusual mermaid claims in surprisingly official circumstances. Mermaids usually belong to folklore, yet the subject has occasionally entered government records and official discussions. Reports involving unusual marine creatures sometimes reached naval authorities, colonial administrators, or local officials because witnesses believed they had encountered something genuinely unexplained. Most such documents do not declare that mermaids exist. They simply preserve testimony that might otherwise have vanished. That difference is easy to overlook. An official record proves that somebody made a claim, not that the claim was correct. Even so, the existence of formal documentation gives certain cases a very different atmosphere from campfire legends. Officials sometimes recorded strange sightings because navigation, fishing, or public concern made them worth noting. In modern times, government agencies have also received enough mermaid questions to issue playful public statements explaining that no verified aquatic humanoid species is known. For conspiracy-minded observers, official interest itself becomes fascinating. They wonder what unusual reports may remain buried in archives under ordinary labels such as unidentified marine animal or unknown swimmer. Modern mermaid sightings continue despite centuries of attempts to explain them away. It would be easy to imagine mermaid reports disappearing once photography, marine biology, and modern navigation became common. They did not. People still claim to see human-like figures in coastal waters and remote aquatic environments. Some modern reports are obvious jokes or deliberate hoaxes. Others involve distant silhouettes that could easily be seals, swimmers, or floating debris. Yet a small number remain difficult to reconstruct because the witness insists that the creature moved in a distinctly unfamiliar way. Video has not solved the mystery either. Blurry recordings can create excitement without providing enough detail for identification. Clear recordings usually reveal ordinary animals or staged performances. This creates some unusual modern paradox. We possess more cameras than any previous generation, but the sea remains a place where distance and poor visibility can defeat them. Skeptics see that as evidence that mermaids survive mainly through misidentification. Believers argue that an intelligent aquatic creature would have every reason to avoid boats, populated beaches, and obvious observation. Human evolution theories have even proposed a forgotten chapter spent partly in water. One of the strangest attempts to connect humanity with the sea came from the aquatic ape hypothesis. The idea suggested that some unusual human traits might have developed during a period when our ancestors depended heavily on watery environments. Supporters pointed toward characteristics such as reduced body hair or our ability to control breathing. Mainstream evolutionary researchers have never accepted the proposal as a convincing explanation for human origins. Fossil evidence does not show a hidden population of mermaid-like ancestors moving permanently into the ocean. Yet the concept captured public imagination because it reverses the familiar story. Instead of asking whether mermaids evolved separately from humans, it asks whether humans themselves carry traces of an aquatic past. More speculative versions push the idea much further than its original advocates ever did. They imagine that one branch returned to land while another remained near the water. There is no established evidence for that scenario, but it provides a fascinating modern framework for an ancient mystery. Ancient Assyria worshipped a powerful goddess whose legend became linked with mermaid origins. Long before European artists painted women with glittering fishtails, people in the ancient Near East worshipped divine figures connected with water and fertility. One name often mentioned in mermaid histories is Atargatis. Her cult became especially important in Syria, and later writers described a tradition in which she had a fish-like form. Over centuries, that image became associated with the ancestry of the Western mermaid. The collection is complicated because ancient religious traditions changed as they moved between cultures. Images, names, and stories could merge without preserving one clear original version. Still, the idea of a powerful female figure linked physically with fish existed long before medieval mermaid tales. Alternative interpretations sometimes treat this as evidence that the familiar mermaid was inherited from memories of actual beings encountered in antiquity. Historians usually see cultural evolution instead. Either way, the timeline is remarkable. The human fish idea was already old before many civilizations commonly associated with mermaids had even begun telling their best-known stories. Greek sirens gradually transformed from bird-like beings into the mermaids recognized today. The sirens of ancient Greek tradition were not originally fish-tailed women. Early art often portrayed them with bird-like bodies and human heads. Their famous power came through their voices, which drew sailors toward danger. Over many centuries, European storytelling began blending sirens with other supernatural beings associated with the sea. Eventually, the word itself became connected with mermaids in several languages. This transformation shows how dramatically mythical creatures can change without disappearing. A being that once belonged partly to the air could become one of the most familiar inhabitants of the ocean. The shift also complicates attempts to trace old mermaid reports. A medieval writer who mentioned a siren might have imagined something completely different from an ancient Greek storyteller. Some people find that fluid identity suspiciously convenient. They wonder whether separate encounters with unusual creatures were repeatedly absorbed into whatever supernatural category already existed. The safer explanation is cultural mixing, but the result remains fascinating. Our modern mermaid may be a composite assembled across centuries. The Syrian goddess Atargatis became one of history's earliest famous human fish figures. According to later traditions, Atargatis was connected with a story in which she entered a lake and took on the form of a fish. Different versions survive, and scholars debate how literally ancient worshippers imagined her body. Some representations emphasize human features, while others focus more strongly on sacred fish. Her temples were associated with pools where fish could receive special protection. This matters because mermaid imagery did not appear from nowhere during the Middle Ages. Ancient religion had already connected divinity with creatures that crossed the boundary between human and aquatic life. To believers in lost civilizations, Atargatis has sometimes become something even stranger. They suggest that deities with animal features might preserve distant memories of beings once encountered physically. There is no reliable evidence that the goddess represented an unknown species. Even so, her story gives the mermaid mystery a surprisingly deep historical foundation. The basic concept reaches back into religious traditions that were already ancient when classical Mediterranean culture was still developing. European churches sometimes displayed mermaid carvings in places far from the sea. One of the most unexpected places to encounter a mermaid is inside a medieval church. Carvings of fish-tailed women appear on stonework and wooden furnishings across parts of Europe. Some were created in communities nowhere near an ocean. Christian artists often used the mermaid as a warning about temptation or worldly desire, so her presence did not imply literal belief in an aquatic species. Yet the carvings reveal how firmly the creature had entered medieval consciousness. Craftsmen expected ordinary people to recognize what the figure represented. That is impressive for a supposedly imaginary animal in an age when most villagers would never travel far from home. Some alternative researchers have wondered whether church imagery preserved older pagan traditions beneath a Christian interpretation. Others suspect that maritime stories spread inland through trade routes more efficiently than we assume. Whatever happened, the mermaid became culturally recognizable far beyond the sailors who supposedly encountered her. By the Middle Ages, she had become part of Europe's shared visual language. Medieval mapmakers placed mermaids among creatures they believed inhabited unexplored oceans. Old maps did more than show coastlines. They also revealed what educated people imagined might exist beyond familiar waters. Sea monsters, enormous fish, and human-like creatures appeared across charts produced during the medieval and early modern periods. Modern viewers often assume these images were simply decoration. Sometimes they were. In other cases, they reflected genuine reports collected from sailors or older natural histories. Map makers worked in a world where reliable observations and inherited legends regularly occupied the same page. That makes mermaid images especially intriguing. They could represent mythology, second-hand testimony, or a warning that unfamiliar waters contained unknown dangers. Some surviving maps portray sea people with enough confidence that they look like members of an accepted marine population. Nobody today can know how literally each artist understood them. What we can see is that mermaids were once placed inside geographical knowledge rather than entirely outside it. For centuries, the boundary between mythical creature and undiscovered animal remained far less certain than it feels now. Viking-age traditions described supernatural sea women who could predict approaching disaster. Northern seafarers lived in intimate contact with dangerous waters, so their folklore naturally filled the sea with powerful beings. Later Scandinavian traditions include mysterious women who appeared near shore or beside vessels, and whose arrival could signal a change in fortune. Some stories treated these figures as supernatural messengers rather than animals. A sighting might warn that rough weather or some other misfortune was approaching. This gave the sea woman a very different role from the romantic mermaid of later popular culture. She was not simply beautiful or enchanting. She belonged to a world where the ocean itself seemed capable of delivering warnings. Folklorists usually understand these beings as expressions of maritime danger and uncertainty. Alternative thinkers sometimes interpret omen stories differently. They suggest that an unusual creature appearing before storms could have been responding to changes in pressure or underwater conditions that humans could not yet detect. If sailors repeatedly noticed that pattern, a biological behavior might eventually have become a supernatural prophecy. Irish folklore preserved Merrow legends with details unlike the familiar storybook mermaid. Ireland's Merrows belong to the broad family of mermaid traditions, but their stories contain features that make them unusually distinctive. Female Merrows were often described as beautiful and capable of forming relationships with humans. Male Merrows could appear far less attractive and sometimes had features that sounded almost animalistic. Certain tales gave these beings magical objects that allowed them to travel between the sea and the human world. A person who obtained such an object might prevent a Merrow from returning home. That theme turns the legend into something more complicated than a simple sighting. It imagines a hidden society with its own rules and methods of crossing between environments. Folklorists connect Merrows with older Irish traditions concerning supernatural beings and enchanted places. More speculative readers notice something else. Stories about special equipment can sound strangely technological when viewed through a modern lens. There is no reason to assume ancient storytellers meant diving devices, but the comparison has kept alternative interpretations alive. Scottish communities told of sea maidens who sometimes lived secretly among humans. Along Scotland's coasts, stories developed about mysterious women who came from the sea and occasionally entered human society. Some traditions described marriages between fishermen and supernatural sea women. These relationships often depended on a hidden object or forbidden action. Once the condition was broken, the woman returned to the water and vanished from ordinary life. Such stories are usually classified alongside Selkie and Mermaid folklore, although the creatures involved can differ considerably. Their enduring appeal comes from a strange underlying idea. The mysterious visitor does not merely appear at a distance. She can supposedly speak, form relationships, and pass among humans without immediately revealing where she came from. Alternative interpretations sometimes take this motif literally and imagine an unknown coastal population capable of temporary life on land. There is no physical evidence for such a community. Still, the story type raises an entertaining possibility. Perhaps legends of secret sea wives survived because they transformed rare encounters with unfamiliar outsiders into something supernatural. Cornwall's Mermaid of Zena legend became tied to a real village family. In the Cornish village of Zenor, an old church contains a carved chair decorated with a mermaid. Local tradition connects that image with one of Britain's most famous mermaid legends. The story tells of a mysterious woman who repeatedly attended church and became associated with a young man from the village. Eventually, both disappeared. Later versions claimed that a mermaid was heard explaining that the man had joined her beneath the sea. What makes the tale unusual is its connection with an actual place that visitors can still see. The carving gives the legend a physical presence, even though it cannot prove the events occurred. Historians generally treat the story as folklore that developed around older church imagery. Local names and family traditions later became woven into the narrative. More imaginative interpretations reverse that explanation. They suggest the carving might commemorate an encounter already remembered by the community. Whatever its origin, Zena shows how easily a mermaid story can become attached to real people and real geography. Welsh traditions described mysterious sea women whose marriages to humans carried strange conditions. Welsh folklore contains stories of beautiful women emerging from lakes or other bodies of water and forming relationships with human men. These figures are not always mermaids in the familiar fish-tailed sense, yet they belong to the same larger mystery of human-like beings associated with water. Their marriages often depended on a precise rule. If the husband violated that condition, the mysterious wife returned permanently to her original home. One famous tradition concerns the Lady of Lyn Way Fan Fatch. Her descendants were later linked in folklore with celebrated healers. This gives the story an unusual legacy because the supernatural visitor becomes part of the human family line. Conventional interpretation treats the tale as mythology shaped by local landscape and ancestry. Alternative readers notice how often legends describe outsiders entering communities under strict conditions. They wonder whether such stories could preserve distorted memories of isolated groups with unfamiliar customs. The supernatural explanation remains folklore, but the social pattern beneath it is surprisingly specific. The Isle of Man preserved stories of mermaid encounters around its isolated coastline. The Isle of Man developed a rich body of maritime folklore shaped by generations who depended on the surrounding sea. Among its stranger traditions are accounts of mermaids and other beings believed to inhabit coastal waters. Fishermen sometimes treated encounters with them as meaningful signs rather than casual curiosities. A mermaid might affect expectations about weather, fishing, or fortune. These beliefs mattered because survival at sea depended on reading small changes in an unpredictable environment. Folklore offered another way to interpret what could not be understood directly. Yet isolated islands also make intriguing settings for alternative theories. Their cliffs, caves, and sparsely observed coves provide countless places where unusual animals could briefly appear without leaving obvious evidence. No verified mermaid species has ever emerged from Manx waters, but the persistence of local stories shows how seriously earlier communities regarded the possibility of intelligent sea beings. On an island surrounded by deep water, the idea never seemed entirely distant from ordinary life. The Isle of Man preserved stories of mermaid encounters around its isolated coastline. Generations of Manx fishermen treated the surrounding sea as a place where ordinary life and strange possibility could overlap. Local traditions described mermaids appearing near rocks or offshore waters. Some accounts linked them with changes in fortune. Others treated them as beings that might approach people under unusual circumstances. The island setting made such stories especially powerful. Much of the coastline was difficult to watch continuously, and fishermen often worked far from witnesses. A brief encounter could therefore survive only as testimony. Folklorists usually see these stories as part of a wider Celtic tradition. Yet the Isle of Man also preserves unusually persistent beliefs in beings that existed just beyond normal human experience. Some people wonder whether rare marine animals could have helped shape those traditions. Others imagine that caves and secluded bays might once have sheltered something less familiar. No physical evidence has settled the question. What remains is a coastline where mermaids were once considered close enough to influence everyday decisions. Icelandic sailors recorded sea people as though they belonged to the natural world. In Icelandic tradition, strange ocean beings were not always treated as impossible monsters. Older descriptions sometimes presented sea people alongside other creatures that sailors expected might exist beyond familiar waters. The distinction matters because medieval observers did not divide nature and folklore as sharply as modern audiences do. A report could be strange without automatically being considered imaginary. Iceland's fishing culture also placed generations of people in rough northern seas where unfamiliar animals occasionally appeared. Seals and whales were well known, so something described as human-like could attract special attention. Some manuscripts contain accounts of creatures with recognizably human features emerging from the ocean. Scholars generally interpret such material through folklore and pre-modern natural history. Alternative readers see a different possibility. If sailors consistently separated ordinary animals from something they called sea people, perhaps they believed they were describing a distinct creature. Whether mistaken or accurate, those reports show that the idea once occupied a surprisingly serious place in northern maritime thought. Norwegian accounts once treated mermaids as possible creatures rather than pure fantasy. Norwegian coastal history contains reports of mysterious sea beings that were sometimes discussed in the language of observation. This does not mean people possessed scientific evidence for mermaids. It means the category of possible marine life was much broader than it is today. Fishermen regularly encountered animals that behaved unpredictably or surfaced only briefly. An unfamiliar shape could therefore become the subject of genuine investigation. Some descriptions referred to creatures with human-like heads or upper bodies. Others were later absorbed into legends about sea women and dangerous coastal spirits. The cold North Atlantic also complicates the usual manatee explanation because tropical sirenians do not belong there. Seals provide a more plausible source for many northern sightings. Yet they do not account perfectly for every description. Some people suspect that several unrelated animals were grouped beneath one name. More adventurous theories propose an unknown cold water species. Whatever the truth, Norwegian traditions reveal that mermaid reports were once discussed inside the broader question of what creatures the sea might contain. Danish folklore gave mermaids powers that were far stranger than beautiful singing. The mermaids of Danish tradition could do much more than sit on rocks and sing. Stories sometimes gave them knowledge of approaching events or the ability to influence human fortune. Their appearance could carry a warning that something important was about to happen. Other tales imagined sea people with their own communities beneath the water. These details make Scandinavian mermaid feel less like decorative fantasy and more like intelligent beings with motives humans only partly understood. The famous literary Mermaid, created by Hans Christian Andersen, later softened the image for international audiences. Older folklore could be much stranger. Some people interpret prophetic mermaids as supernatural figures created to explain coincidence. Another possibility is more grounded. Coastal animals can react to changing weather before humans notice obvious signs. If an unusual creature repeatedly appeared before storms, sailors might eventually associate it with prediction. A simple behavioral pattern could grow into a legend about foresight. That possibility gives the old stories a fascinating bridge between observation and belief. Slavic Rusalki developed separately from ocean mermaids, yet shared several unsettling similarities. Rusalki belong mainly to freshwater traditions rather than open ocean folklore. They were associated with rivers and lakes across parts of the Slavic world. Their stories also developed through a different cultural history from the classic Western mermaid. Even so, the similarities are difficult to miss. Rusalki were often imagined as female beings connected with water who could attract or unsettle people nearby. Their appearance was not always fish-like, which reminds us that the idea of a water woman does not require a tail. In some regions, they were linked with seasonal beliefs and older spiritual traditions. Folklorists generally explain them through local religion and changing ideas about the dead. Yet comparative mythology raises an interesting puzzle. Why do human-like female beings appear so often wherever deep water becomes culturally important? One answer is that people naturally give human form to dangerous environments. Another is that different traditions preserve fragments of something more ancient. The shared pattern remains intriguing precisely because the details are not identical. African water spirit traditions contain human-like beings associated with rivers and seas. Across parts of Africa, stories about human-like water beings developed within belief systems that were very different from European mermaid folklore. These entities were not simply copies of sailors' tales imported from overseas. Many traditions gave water spirits powerful social or spiritual roles. They could be connected with prosperity or personal transformation. Their relationship with humans was often complicated rather than purely threatening. Some accounts described beautiful figures who appeared near rivers or coastal waters. Others focused more on an invisible presence associated with particular places. Colonial contact later mixed local traditions with foreign mermaid imagery, which makes the history difficult to untangle. Still, the existence of older water spirit beliefs shows that human-like beings beneath the surface were not a uniquely European invention. Some people see this as evidence of a recurring psychological pattern. Others wonder whether similar encounters produce different cultural explanations. The mystery becomes deeper when the traditions are studied on their own terms, because the similarities appear without requiring identical stories. Mami Wata traditions describe powerful water beings whose appearance changed across different regions. Mami Wata is not one single creature with one fixed description. Across parts of Africa and the wider African diaspora, the name became associated with powerful water spirits whose appearance varied according to place and period. Some images resemble the familiar mermaid. Others show a woman connected with snakes or symbols of wealth. This flexibility makes the tradition especially interesting. It demonstrates how an older water spirit can absorb new visual influences without losing its deeper identity. European prints and imported objects helped shape some later representations. Yet many communities already possessed strong beliefs about spiritually charged waters. Mamiwata could offer fortune or demand serious obligations. Encounters were often described as transformative rather than casual. Alternative thinkers sometimes focus on reports in which the being appears physically present and communicates directly with humans. Folklorists usually understand those accounts through religious experience. Either way, Mamiwata shows how mermaid-like imagery can become attached to a complex tradition that reaches far beyond simple stories of sea creatures. Caribbean folklore blended African and European water beings into entirely new mermaid traditions. The Caribbean became a meeting point for belief systems carried across oceans under dramatically different circumstances. European mermaid stories arrived alongside African traditions involving powerful water spirits. Indigenous beliefs were already present throughout the region. Over time, these influences combined into new accounts of aquatic beings that belonged specifically to Caribbean culture. Some were beautiful and dangerous. Others acted more like spirits tied to particular rivers or coastal places. This blending makes it difficult to trace any single story back to one source. It also reveals how strongly the idea of human-like water beings survived cultural upheaval. Some people see that survival as evidence that mermaid stories respond to something universal in human imagination. More speculative interpretations suggest that different traditions may have been recognizing the same unexplained phenomenon through different belief systems. The Caribbean adds another complication because manatees genuinely inhabit parts of the region. Known animals and inherited mythology could therefore reinforce each other. The result is a remarkably layered mermaid tradition with several possible origins. Brazil's Iara legend describes an alluring water being with unusually ancient roots. The Iara is one of Brazil's best-known supernatural water figures. Modern versions often describe a beautiful woman who lives in rivers and draws people toward the water. Yet the character did not emerge from one simple source. Indigenous traditions mixed over time with European mermaid imagery and other cultural influences. The name itself became attached to stories that changed as they spread. This makes Iara a useful example of how mermaid-like legends can evolve without ever becoming completely disconnected from their local setting. The Amazon basin contains vast waterways where unusual encounters can occur far from large settlements. That environment naturally encourages speculation. Some people wonder whether rare animals contributed to early stories that were later given human form. Others see Iara entirely through folklore and cultural history. The most intriguing possibility is that several different traditions became layered together until nobody could separate them again. Instead of one origin, the legend may preserve several explanations for the same enduring fear that something intelligent could be watching from the river. Amazon communities preserved stories of aquatic shapeshifters long before modern cryptid culture. The Amazon contains some of the world's most persistent traditions about beings that move between human and aquatic forms. These stories did not begin with internet cryptids or modern paranormal entertainment. They developed within communities that lived closely with immense river systems. Shape-shifting creatures could explain strange disappearances or unexpected encounters near the water. They also offered a way to understand animals whose behavior seemed unusually intelligent. The most famous examples involve river dolphins, but the broader idea reaches beyond one species. A creature might appear human on land before returning to the river. To modern ears, that sounds like fantasy. Yet from a speculative angle, it raises an entertaining possibility. Could stories about transformation preserve memories of beings that looked human only under certain conditions? Mainstream anthropology treats shapeshifting as symbolic folklore rather than biological testimony. Still, the Amazon reminds us that mermaid-like mysteries do not always involve fishtails. Sometimes the central idea is simply that a human-like intelligence belongs to the water. The pink river dolphin inspired legends about beings that could become human. Amazon River dolphins are already unusual enough to seem almost mythical. Their bodies are flexible, their coloration can become strikingly pink, and they move through murky rivers where visibility is poor. Around these animals grew stories that they could take human form. In many versions, a dolphin becomes an attractive stranger who appears during social gatherings before returning to the river. The legend provides a supernatural explanation for mysterious visitors and unexpected events within isolated communities. Biologists have no evidence that dolphins transform into people. Yet the story demonstrates how closely intelligence and human-like behavior can become linked in folklore. River dolphins are curious animals with complex social lives. A brief encounter in dark water could easily feel personal rather than random. Some people wonder whether old shapeshifter tales encode observations about dolphin intelligence in symbolic form. Others push the idea further and imagine forgotten encounters with something more humanoid. Either way, the pink dolphin occupies a remarkable boundary between a genuinely extraordinary animal and a legend that makes it stranger still. West African coastal traditions sometimes describe underwater societies hidden beneath ordinary waters. Some West African stories do not merely imagine isolated spirits living in rivers or oceans. They describe entire realms beneath the water, with inhabitants who possess their own forms of wealth and social order. People who encounter these worlds may return changed, or receive objects that carry unusual significance. Such accounts belong to spiritual traditions rather than zoological reports. Yet their structure is fascinating, because they portray underwater existence as organized and inhabited. The idea appears elsewhere in the world too, but local versions develop their own meanings. Some people interpret underwater kingdoms as symbolic reflections of human society. Others view them as sacred spaces reached through altered states or ritual experience. More speculative readers ask whether the stories could preserve a distorted memory of real communities associated with submerged caves or coastal settlements. There is no evidence for hidden civilizations beneath modern West African waters. Even so, these traditions dramatically expand the mermaid mystery. They imagine not one creature hiding underwater, but a complete world operating beyond ordinary human access. South African folklore includes mysterious water people associated with caves and deep pools. Southern African traditions include beings associated with deep water who do not always resemble the classic European mermaid. Some are connected with rivers or pools that communities regard as spiritually powerful. In certain stories, people disappear into the water and later return after encounters with beings beneath the surface. Caves also appear in some traditions because water can emerge from places that seem to lead underground. These accounts often belong to systems of spiritual belief involving healing or initiation. Reducing them to simple monster stories would miss their cultural meaning. Yet the physical settings remain intriguing. Deep pools and flooded caves are environments that can hide their true size from casual observation. Even today, underwater cave systems can be difficult to explore completely. Some people therefore imagine that legends about water people might preserve memories of unusual cave dwellers or unknown animals. No such population has been verified. What survives instead is a tradition in which entering deep water can mean crossing into another inhabited realm. Australian Aboriginal traditions contain ancient accounts of humanoid beings connected with water. Across Australia, Aboriginal cultures preserve many distinct traditions involving rivers and waterholes. Some include powerful beings with human-like characteristics. Others describe entities whose forms do not fit neatly into the Western idea of a mermaid. These traditions can be extremely old, although individual stories cannot always be dated precisely. Their significance also differs from community to community. Water sources in dry landscapes carry obvious practical importance, so stories associated with them often involve rules about behavior and access. From a conventional perspective, such narratives help preserve cultural knowledge about dangerous places. Alternative thinkers notice another possibility. If people occupied the continent for immense periods, they may have witnessed animals or environmental conditions that later disappeared. Some stories could therefore contain memories whose original references are no longer obvious. That does not turn every water spirit into a biological creature. It does make the traditions especially valuable when thinking about how long unusual observations can survive through oral history. The mermaid mystery becomes much older when viewed through that possibility. Pacific Island legends describe sea people who could interact directly with human communities. Across the Pacific, island societies developed stories about beings that lived in the ocean yet could communicate with people on land. Some accounts describe marriage or friendship between humans and sea dwellers. Others involve visitors who arrive from the water with unfamiliar abilities. These stories grew in cultures with extraordinary maritime knowledge. Pacific navigators could cross enormous distances using stars and ocean conditions long before European vessels reached many islands. That expertise makes their supernatural traditions especially interesting. People who understood the sea intimately still imagined intelligent beings living within it. Folklorists interpret such tales through ancestry and local religion. Some people propose that stories of sea visitors might also preserve encounters with travelers from unfamiliar islands. A boat arriving unexpectedly could seem mysterious if its occupants came from a distant culture. More speculative interpretations imagine an aquatic population instead. Evidence for that idea is absent, but the legends remain remarkable because their sea people often behave less like monsters and more like another society that occasionally meets our own. Polynesian traditions include aquatic beings whose stories predate European arrival by generations. Polynesian mythology contains many beings connected with the ocean, and some possess partly human characteristics. Their stories existed within societies that had already mastered long-distance navigation before sustained European contact. This matters because later Western mermaid imagery cannot explain every element. Polynesian traditions developed their own categories of ocean spirits and supernatural people. Some beings could change form or interact with human families. Others were associated with particular islands or stretches of water. The ocean was not imagined as empty space between communities. It was a living environment with its own inhabitants and powers. Some people view these stories as spiritual interpretations of marine animals that were genuinely encountered. Others wonder whether memories of lost voyages became transformed into supernatural narratives. The Pacific contains islands that were settled and abandoned over time, which gives that idea an intriguing historical background. Nothing proves that aquatic humanoids were involved. Still, these traditions show that intelligent sea beings formed part of Polynesian imagination, without needing the familiar European mermaid as a starting point. Hawaiian folklore describes ocean spirits capable of appearing in surprisingly human forms. Hawaiian tradition contains beings associated with the sea that could move between ordinary human appearance and supernatural identity. Some stories describe guardians connected with particular families. Others involve shark deities or ocean entities that could take human form. These figures are not mermaids in the standard sense, yet they challenge the same boundary between humanity and marine life. Hawaiian culture developed in close relationship with an ocean rich in powerful animals. Sharks could be feared or respected depending on context. The idea that a creature might possess a human identity offered a way to understand behavior that seemed purposeful. Some people interpret these stories as evidence that island communities recognized intelligence in marine animals more deeply than outsiders expected. Alternative theories go further and imagine encounters with beings capable of deliberate disguise. There is no evidence for literal transformation. What makes the tradition fascinating is the ease with which human and ocean identities can overlap. In these stories, appearing human does not necessarily mean being human. Melanesian communities developed mermaid-like traditions without needing the European mermaid image. Melanesia includes thousands of islands and many separate cultural traditions. Within some communities, stories developed about human-like beings associated with the sea long before modern mermaid imagery became globally familiar. These figures were often very different from the elegant fish-tailed woman of European art. Some looked more animalistic. Others behaved like members of another hidden population. The variation is important because it suggests local traditions were responding to local environments rather than copying one universal image. Reefs and deep channels can bring unusual animals close to shore. A creature seen briefly in turbulent water may resist easy identification. Some people think that seals or dugongs could account for particular stories where their ranges allow it. Others point to cultural explanations that require no physical animal at all. More adventurous theories imagine that remote islands could preserve sightings of rare species unknown elsewhere. That possibility remains unsupported. Yet Melanesian traditions remind us that the mermaid idea can survive even when the creature looks nothing like the mermaid most people expect. New Zealand traditions include ocean beings that challenge simple explanations based on folklore. Maori traditions contain many supernatural beings associated with water. Among them are creatures and human-like entities that do not fit neatly into the European mermaid category. Some stories involve taniwha that inhabit rivers or coastal waters. Others describe beings whose appearance can seem surprisingly humanoid. These traditions emerged within a culture possessing detailed knowledge of local waterways and marine life. That makes simplistic explanations difficult. A community familiar with seals or large fish would not necessarily mistake every unusual animal for something supernatural. Yet folklore also serves purposes far beyond literal observation. A dangerous waterway may be personified so warnings remain memorable across generations. Some people argue that legends could preserve information about hazards that later changed or disappeared. More speculative interpretations suggest they might encode encounters with extinct animals encountered during early settlement. There is no clear evidence tying mermaid-like beings to any lost species. Still, New Zealand offers a powerful example of how water mysteries can preserve practical knowledge and extraordinary possibilities within the same tradition. Japanese Ningyo legends describe creatures far stranger than Western mermaids with human faces. A Ningyo was not usually imagined as a beautiful woman with a graceful fishtail. Traditional descriptions could be far more unsettling. Some gave the creature a fish-like body with a human face. Others emphasized strange mouths or unusual voices. The name itself simply connects the being with a human fish concept, but there was never one fixed appearance. That flexibility separates Ningyo folklore from the standardized mermaid image familiar today. Encounters were often treated as extraordinary omens rather than romantic adventures. Catching one could bring fear because unusual events might follow. Some descriptions even suggest that the creature's body possessed valuable or dangerous properties. Modern readers often assume such beings were invented through encounters with rare fish. That is certainly possible. deep-sea animals can look astonishing when brought to the surface. Some people wonder whether an unfamiliar marine mammal might have inspired human-like features. Whatever happened, Ningyo stories demonstrate that the idea of a human fish can become far stranger than the Western mermaid tradition ever allowed. Eating the flesh of a Ningyo supposedly granted an impossibly long human life. One Japanese legend gives the Ningyo a property stranger than its appearance. Its flesh was said to extend human life beyond any normal limit. The most famous stories treat this gift as something closer to a burden than a blessing. Someone who ate the creature might survive while generations of ordinary people passed away. This belief transforms the Ningyo from an unusual animal into a source of forbidden biological power. Folklorists connect the theme with religious ideas about longevity and the dangers of violating natural boundaries. Yet modern speculative thinking gives it another twist. What if ancient people encountered an organism with unusual regenerative properties and exaggerated them over time? Some marine animals genuinely possess remarkable abilities to repair tissue or resist aging. None grants immortality to humans, of course. Still, discoveries like these make the old legend unexpectedly interesting. The tale may be supernatural, but its central idea feels surprisingly modern. Somewhere in the sea, nature might possess biological mechanisms that humans have barely begun to understand. The legend of Yao Bikuni tells of a woman who lived for centuries. According to Japanese tradition, a young woman unknowingly ate flesh from a Ningyo and stopped aging normally. She became known as Yao Bikumi. The name is often interpreted as the 800-year nun, because later versions claim she lived for an extraordinary span before finally ending her long life. During those centuries, everyone she knew repeatedly grew old and disappeared. The story became less about gaining immortality and more about the loneliness it might create. Different regions developed their own versions, which makes it difficult to identify one original narrative. Some people believe the legend reflects Buddhist themes about impermanence. Others wonder whether Yao Bikuni grew from memories of several unusually long-lived women whose stories gradually merged. The mermaid connection adds a deeper mystery. Her impossible lifespan supposedly came from consuming a creature already regarded as unnatural. No historical evidence confirms the event. Yet the story remains one of the world's strangest examples of a mermaid legend directly altering the course of a human life. Japanese fishermen sometimes considered captured Ningyo an omen of extraordinary coming events. Finding a Ningyo was not necessarily good fortune. In some traditions, the appearance of one could signal major change. Stories linked these creatures with storms or other events that disrupted ordinary life. A fisherman who caught something resembling a Ningyo might therefore release it rather than celebrate the discovery. This fear could help explain why legends rarely end with a specimen being carefully preserved for study. From a practical perspective, unusual marine animals sometimes do appear before environmental changes. Storms can push deep water species toward shore. Earthquakes may also coincide with unexpected strandings, although reliable prediction remains impossible. Some people wonder whether observations like these helped create the omen tradition. An unfamiliar fish arriving before a disaster would be remembered far more vividly than one appearing during an ordinary week. Over generations, coincidence could become prophecy. More speculative thinkers imagine that an intelligent creature might deliberately surface before dangerous events. There is no evidence for that idea, but it gives an eerie logic to one of Japan's oldest mermaid beliefs. A preserved Japanese mermaid specimen became the subject of modern scientific examination. One famous specimen preserved at a Japanese temple attracted modern researchers because local tradition identified it as a mermaid-like creature. The object had a small humanoid upper body attached to a fish-like lower section. Rather than dismissing it immediately, investigators used modern imaging and material analysis to learn how it had been constructed. Their work suggested that the specimen was manufactured from several substances rather than representing an unknown animal. That finding appears to close the case, yet it opens another question. Why were such objects created with enough care to survive for generations? Some may have been devotional pieces or curiosities. Others could have been designed to imitate creatures already familiar from folklore. Alternative thinkers focus on that second possibility. A fake image can still reveal what its maker believed the real thing should look like. No preserved Japanese mermaid has produced evidence of an undiscovered humanoid species. Even so, scientific examination has turned these relics into valuable clues about how seriously people once imagined such creatures. Chinese texts described mysterious human-like beings living beneath the sea in ancient times. Ancient Chinese literature contains descriptions of unusual beings associated with distant seas. Some accounts speak of people or creatures living beneath the water and possessing qualities unlike ordinary humans. Later traditions include figures sometimes translated as merfolk. Certain stories even describe special substances produced by these beings that humans valued. The texts belong to a literary world where geography and wonder often mixed freely, so they cannot be read as straightforward field reports. Even so, they demonstrate that the idea of intelligent aquatic humanoids existed far beyond Europe. Some descriptions imagine underwater communities rather than lone monsters. That detail has attracted alternative theorists who compare them with legends of submerged civilizations. Historians generally interpret the stories through mythology and ancient geographical imagination. Another possibility is that reports of distant coastal peoples became exaggerated as they traveled inland. A community skilled at diving might eventually become a race that lived underwater. However the stories began, China developed its own version of the Sea People mystery with a surprisingly elaborate identity. Korean folklore contains aquatic women whose legends developed independently of European traditions. Korean folklore includes stories involving mysterious female beings associated with water. Some resemble mermaids only loosely, while others share familiar themes involving beauty or encounters with fishermen. These tales developed through East Asian cultural traditions rather than directly from medieval European mermaid stories. That separate history is important. It shows how the basic idea of a woman belonging to the water can emerge in very different settings. Coastal Korea supported fishing communities that regularly interacted with seals and other marine animals. Misidentification offers one possible explanation for certain sightings. Yet folklore often transformed encounters into stories about relationships or supernatural consequences, rather than simple animal reports. Some people suggest that female divers may also have influenced particular traditions. Skilled women worked underwater in parts of Korea for generations, and distant observers could easily turn extraordinary diving abilities into legend. More speculative readers imagine that such human practices may themselves echo an older connection with the sea. The evidence supports culture, but the mystery invites wider possibilities. Philippine stories describe mermaid-like beings known for appearing near reefs and coastal waters. Across the Philippines, stories of Serena describe female aquatic beings that resemble the Western mermaid in some modern versions. Local traditions also include other water entities with very different appearances. The archipelago's enormous coastline provides a natural setting for such beliefs. Fishing communities have spent generations near reefs where visibility can shift within seconds. Dugongs also survive in Philippine waters, offering one known animal that could contribute to human-like sightings. Yet the folklore became much richer than simple misidentification. Serena stories often describe intelligent beings capable of interacting with people and sometimes drawing them into the water. Spanish influence likely shaped the terminology and later imagery. Older indigenous water beliefs may have supplied deeper foundations. Some people therefore see Philippine mermaid traditions as a fusion of several histories. The alternative possibility is more provocative. Perhaps repeated encounters with a real marine creature were interpreted through whatever cultural language was available at the time. Either explanation leaves the islands with one of Asia's most persistent mermaid traditions. Indonesian traditions include sea queens whose legends still influence modern coastal beliefs. Along parts of Java, belief in a powerful queen of the southern sea remains culturally significant. Nyai Roro Kidul is not simply a mermaid. She is usually understood as a supernatural ruler associated with the dangerous waters of the Indian Ocean. Stories describe a kingdom beneath the waves and a power that can affect human lives on shore. Certain traditions warn against wearing particular colors near the coast because they are believed to attract her attention. These beliefs remain well known today. The legend may contain layers of older Javanese spirituality combined with later royal traditions. Some people interpret the sea queen as a personification of an ocean notorious for strong currents and sudden danger. More speculative ideas imagine that stories of an underwater court preserve memories of a lost coastal culture. Rising seas have submerged ancient landscapes around Indonesia since prehistoric times. There is no evidence connecting those drowned lands with mermaids. Yet the real existence of submerged territory makes the legendary underwater kingdom especially irresistible. Thailand has its own mermaid tradition shaped by stories older than Western fairy tales. Thai culture includes a famous mermaid figure known as Savanamaka. She appears in regional versions of the Ramayana and became especially prominent in Southeast Asian storytelling. Unlike many dangerous mermaids, Savanamaka can be intelligent and sympathetic. Her story involves an encounter with Hanuman during the construction of a causeway across the sea. She commands aquatic followers who interfere with the work before eventually changing course. This gives her something rare in mermaid traditions. She possesses authority over other sea beings rather than existing alone. The character reflects a literary tradition that developed independently from European fairy tales about mermaids. Artistic depictions later gave her the familiar form of a beautiful woman with a fishtail. Some alternative readers are fascinated by the idea of organized underwater societies hidden inside ancient epics. Scholars see mythic storytelling shaped by older Indian sources. Both perspectives highlight the same remarkable point. Long before modern fantasy standardized mermaids, Southeast Asia already imagined intelligent sea people with their own leadership and motives. Indian mythology contains water beings whose traits sometimes resemble later mermaid traditions. Indian religious and literary traditions contain several types of beings connected with water. Some are fully human in appearance. Others combine human and animal features. Figures known as apsaras are often linked with celestial waters rather than oceans, while nagas belong to a different serpent-associated tradition. None maps perfectly onto the modern mermaid, yet ancient Indian art and storytelling repeatedly cross the boundary between human identity and aquatic realms. This matters because later mermaid-like figures in South and Southeast Asia developed within a much older mythological landscape. Some people argue that familiar fish-tailed forms emerged through artistic exchange rather than independent encounters. Others are intrigued by how frequently ancient cultures imagined intelligent beings occupying environments inaccessible to ordinary humans. Underwater palaces appear in several traditions as places of wealth or hidden knowledge. There is no archaeological evidence that such realms existed literally. Still, these stories provide another ancient precedent for the same irresistible idea. Humanity may share the world with intelligent beings living beneath the water. Ancient Babylonian art portrayed human-fish hybrids connected with sacred knowledge. Some of the earliest images that resemble human-fish hybrids come from ancient Mesopotamia. These figures were not decorative sea monsters. They were connected with wisdom and divine authority. Carvings sometimes show a human figure wearing the body of a fish, like a ceremonial covering. Other images blur the boundary more completely. Scholars usually interpret them as religious symbols rather than portraits of living creatures. Yet alternative writers have long been fascinated by one detail. These beings were linked with knowledge that supposedly came from beyond ordinary human society. That makes the imagery feel unusually modern to anyone interested in lost civilizations. Perhaps the fish form simply represented water as a sacred source of life. Another possibility is that priests wore elaborate costumes inspired by older myths. More speculative interpretations imagine memories of visitors whose appearance was later ritualized. No archaeological evidence proves that aquatic humanoids walked through Babylon. Still, the connection between water, intelligence, and human-like beings appeared remarkably early in recorded civilization. The mysterious Apkallu were described as beings linked to both humanity and water. Mesopotamian tradition speaks of extraordinary figures known as the Apkallu. They were associated with wisdom and with the earliest ages of civilization. Some were represented as human-like beings covered by fish skins. Others appeared with features that made them seem partly supernatural. Their role was not to terrorize humanity. They were teachers and protectors who possessed knowledge ordinary people did not. Ancient texts connect them with a time before a great flood changed the world. That detail has made them irresistible to alternative theorists. Some people suggest that the Apkallu preserve memories of an advanced culture that survived an ancient catastrophe. Others imagine that the fish imagery points toward beings adapted to water. Historians interpret the figures within Mesopotamian religion and royal ideology. Yet even that explanation leaves an intriguing mystery. Why did one of the world's earliest civilizations imagine its legendary teachers with such strong aquatic associations? Whatever the answer, the Apkallu placed intelligence from the water near the very beginning of human history. Mesopotamian fishmen were sometimes credited with bringing civilization to early human communities. Ancient stories from Mesopotamia contain a remarkable claim. Beings connected with the sea supposedly helped teach people the skills required for civilized life. Later accounts describe them sharing knowledge about writing and building. They also instructed humans in laws and practical arts. The idea is extraordinary because the teachers arrive from an environment humans could not inhabit. Mainstream historians see these stories as myths, expressing the divine origin of culture. Yet alternative interpretations ask whether something historical might lie behind them. Perhaps coastal teachers from a more advanced community arrived by boat and were gradually remembered as beings from the sea itself. Another theory imagines survivors from settlements lost beneath rising waters. More adventurous versions take the descriptions literally and propose an aquatic intelligence. There is no accepted evidence for such beings. Still, the structure of the story remains unusual. Civilization does not simply emerge through ordinary discovery. Knowledge arrives from outsiders associated with water, and those mysterious instructors become part of humanity's explanation for its own sudden advancement. Ones supposedly emerged from the sea to teach ancient people extraordinary knowledge. One of the strangest figures preserved from ancient Mesopotamian tradition is Ones. A later Babylonian account describes him emerging from the sea near the beginning of civilization. He supposedly had the body of a fish combined with human features. During the day, he lived among people and taught them essential knowledge. At night, he returned to the water. The story says he instructed humanity in subjects needed for organized society. This makes Own sound less like a monster and more like a visiting teacher. Historians believe the account reflects older Mesopotamian traditions involving wise beings associated with the god E. Some people see something more startling. They wonder whether an encounter with a foreign teacher was transformed over generations into a supernatural story. Others take the aquatic details literally and imagine an intelligent marine species. Evidence for that idea does not exist. Yet Own's remains remarkable because one of humanity's oldest civilization stories begins with a knowledgeable stranger walking out of the sea. Some alternative researchers connect Own's with later stories of intelligent underwater beings. Own's has become a favorite figure for writers who believe ancient myths may contain distorted historical memories. They compare his story with later legends of sea people who communicate with humans or possess hidden knowledge. The similarities can sound striking when placed side by side. Yet, there is a danger in treating every aquatic being as part of one global tradition. Cultures regularly create similar ideas for different reasons. Still, Own's offers something unusually specific. He is described as intelligent and purposeful. His role centers on teaching rather than seduction or danger. That separates him from many familiar mermaid stories. Some people imagine that later accounts of underwater civilizations could descend from the same forgotten source. Another interpretation suggests that the original story remembered seafaring visitors whose clothing looked strange to local observers. No direct evidence connects Own's with later mermaid traditions. The fascination comes from the possibility itself. If one ancient story preserved a memory of intelligent sea visitors, perhaps later legends are echoes rather than inventions. Ancient depictions of fish-tailed humans appear centuries before European mermaid folklore flourished. The familiar mermaid did not suddenly appear in medieval Europe. Human figures joined with fish bodies can be found in ancient art from much earlier periods. Some belonged to gods. Others represented supernatural attendants or beings associated with the sea. Their meanings varied widely, which is important because not every fish-tailed figure was a mermaid. Even so, the artistic idea was already established long before European folklore gave it a recognizable modern form. Cultural exchange provides one convincing explanation. Symbols traveled through trade and conquest, then changed as new societies adopted them. Yet alternative thinkers wonder why this hybrid shape remains so durable. A human upper body joined to a fish seems oddly specific to repeat for thousands of years. Perhaps it reflects a simple visual solution for depicting someone who belongs underwater. Or perhaps artists were copying older descriptions whose origins were eventually forgotten. Whatever inspired them, ancient fish-tailed humans prove that the central mermaid image has a history far deeper than fairy tales. Roman writers discussed marine beings that supposedly resembled familiar land animals and humans. Ancient Roman natural history was filled with reports of creatures that seemed to mirror life on land. Writers described sea versions of familiar animals because they believed the ocean might contain its own equivalents of terrestrial forms. Within that worldview, reports of human-like marine beings did not seem completely absurd. The sea was enormous and difficult to investigate. Strange creatures could therefore be accepted on testimony that would never satisfy modern zoology. Some accounts probably came from badly identified whales or seals. Others were inherited from Greek sources and repeated without direct observation. Yet the Roman approach reveals something fascinating about earlier ideas of nature. A sea human could be treated as a possible animal rather than a purely supernatural being. Some people argue that this makes ancient mermaid reports more interesting because they were sometimes recorded alongside ordinary wildlife. Skeptics reply that ancient natural histories also contained obvious legends. Both points are true. The mystery lies in deciding where observation ended and imagination began. Pliny the Elder recorded reports of sea people in his natural history. Pliny the Elder attempted to gather an enormous amount of knowledge about the natural world into one work. Among his accounts were reports of marine creatures with surprisingly human characteristics. He did not personally verify everything he included. His method often relied on earlier texts or second-hand testimony. That makes his work a complicated source for anyone searching for ancient mermaids. Yet it is still remarkable that such claims appeared inside a serious attempt to describe nature. Pliny recorded stories of seamen and other beings whose forms seemed to echo humans on land. Modern zoology explains many ancient marine monsters through known animals or exaggerated reports. Even so, some descriptions remain difficult to match neatly with one species. Alternative readers sometimes treat Pliny as evidence that unusual aquatic humanoids were known to antiquity. Historians are more cautious. His writing shows what educated Romans considered worth recording, not necessarily what existed. Still, the boundary between legend and zoology becomes surprisingly thin when reading his accounts. Classical writers sometimes treated humanoid sea creatures as zoological mysteries rather than mythology. Not every ancient reference to a sea person appears in a religious story. Some writers placed human-like marine beings inside discussions of animals and unusual natural phenomena. That distinction is easy to miss. A creature could be extraordinary without being understood as a god or spirit. Ancient observers knew that the ocean produced animals with bizarre forms. They therefore had fewer reasons to reject a strange report, simply because it sounded impossible. Modern readers often reverse that assumption. If an account resembles a mermaid, we immediately classify it as folklore. Some people argue that this could cause genuine observations to be overlooked. Of course, ancient zoology also accepted creatures that never existed. Second-hand reports could change dramatically as they traveled. Yet the category itself is fascinating. There were periods when educated writers considered the possibility that something human-like might genuinely live in the sea. Whether they were wrong or unexpectedly perceptive remains part of the larger mystery surrounding historical mermaid reports. Early naturalists placed mermaids inside serious books about animals and the known world. For centuries, mermaids appeared in works that were intended to describe real nature. They could be illustrated alongside fish or marine mammals without a clear warning that they belonged to fantasy. This did not mean every naturalist personally believed in them. Authors often compiled information from older authorities whose claims were difficult to verify. Still, readers encountered mermaids within the same framework used to learn about genuine animals. That gave the creatures a kind of credibility that modern audiences rarely appreciate. Exploration was constantly expanding the known world, and astonishing species were arriving in Europe from distant regions. A creature that sounded impossible one decade might become accepted the next. Some people wonder whether mermaids survived in natural history because reliable sailors kept reporting them. Others see the process as inherited error, repeated by respected writers. Both possibilities reveal how uncertain zoological knowledge once was. Before global exploration became systematic, the mermaid occupied a strange borderland between folklore and a species that might eventually be discovered. Renaissance scholars debated whether mermaids might represent genuine, undiscovered forms of marine life. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in ancient texts and direct observation of nature. Yet those two sources did not always agree. Scholars inherited centuries of mermaid stories at the same time that explorers were returning with animals Europeans had never imagined. This created a fascinating intellectual problem. Should strange creatures from old books be discarded or treated as species still awaiting confirmation? Some writers chose caution. Others included sea people in natural histories because repeated testimony seemed difficult to ignore. The discovery of genuinely bizarre animals made skepticism harder than it sounds today. A rhinoceros or armadillo could seem almost mythical to someone seeing one for the first time. Alternative thinkers point to this period as evidence that mermaids were not always dismissed as fantasy. Historians instead emphasize the limited standards of verification. Both views help explain why debate continued. The mermaid survived because the ocean remained capable of producing surprises, and nobody could confidently say that every strange marine report had already been explained. 16th century illustrations portrayed sea bishops as bizarre humanoid creatures from the ocean. Among the strangest beings depicted in early European natural histories was the so-called sea bishop. Illustrations show a marine creature whose body supposedly resembled the robes and headgear of a Christian bishop. Reports circulated that such an animal had been captured and displayed before important people. Modern scholars generally suspect misidentification or invention. A large ray or another unusual fish may have helped inspire the shape. Yet the image became convincing enough to be copied into serious books. This case reveals how quickly one strange report could gain authority once respected writers repeated it. The sea bishop also matters to the mermaid mystery because it belongs to a larger category of humanoid marine creatures that Europeans thought might be real. Some people wonder whether badly preserved sightings of unknown animals became exaggerated through illustration. Others see deliberate symbolism. Whatever the explanation, early readers were asked to consider a creature that looked absurdly human without being a mermaid at all. The ocean seemed capable of imitating humanity in several forms. The sea monk became another mysterious humanoid animal reported by European observers. The sea monk was said to resemble a hooded religious figure emerging from the water. Accounts circulated in Europe during the 16th century and appeared in influential natural histories. Illustrations varied so widely that reconstructing the original animal is difficult. Modern explanations have included squid, sharks, and rays. Each can produce shapes that might look vaguely humanoid under unusual conditions. Yet no proposed identification perfectly matches every historical image because the drawings were probably altered through retelling. What makes the sea monk important is not whether it was real in the form depicted. It shows that Europeans encountered marine animals strange enough to receive human identities. A creature seen briefly could become a monk after only a few steps of interpretation. Some people apply that lesson directly to mermaids. Perhaps many sightings began with genuinely unusual animals before imagination supplied the human features. Others wonder whether the broad category of sea people hid several different unknown species. Either possibility makes old natural history unexpectedly useful. Natural history collections once displayed alleged mermaid remains beside accepted animal specimens. Before modern museums developed strict standards for zoological evidence, collectors assembled extraordinary objects from around the world. Shells and preserved animals could sit beside creatures whose authenticity was far more doubtful. Alleged mermaid bodies sometimes entered these collections as prized curiosities. Their presence gave visitors a powerful impression that the legendary creature had crossed into the physical world. Many specimens were manufactured by combining parts from different animals. Yet detecting such work was not always easy before modern imaging or forensic analysis. Wealthy collectors could therefore possess a mermaid without knowing whether it represented fraud or nature. Some people believe this environment allowed deliberate hoaxes to flourish. Others wonder whether a genuine, unusual specimen could have disappeared among the fakes. That possibility is impossible to prove, but difficult to resist. Once counterfeit mermaids became common, any authentic anomaly might have been dismissed with them. The collections reveal a period when physical evidence existed everywhere, yet almost none of it could be trusted completely. Sailors sometimes gave detailed descriptions of mermaids that differed from popular artistic conventions. Historical witnesses did not always describe the elegant creature seen in paintings. Some sailors reported coarse hair or unusual skin. Others mentioned faces that seemed partly human without appearing beautiful. These differences matter because they can work against the idea that witnesses merely saw what stories had taught them to expect. A person inventing a mermaid might be expected to reproduce the familiar image. Instead, some reports describe something awkward or animalistic. Skeptics argue that misidentified seals and other mammals naturally create exactly this kind of variation. Distance can make a head appear human for only a moment. Alternative thinkers reach the opposite conclusion. They suggest that inconsistent beauty may indicate witnesses were describing real organisms rather than fantasy. Neither argument settles the issue. What makes the reports fascinating is their specificity. The witnesses often seemed less interested in telling a magical story than in describing something they found difficult to classify. That uncomfortable detail keeps certain old encounters alive long after their original observers disappeared. Henry Hudson's crew recorded a mermaid encounter during an Arctic voyage. During one of Henry Hudson's northern voyages, members of his crew reported seeing a mermaid beside the ship. The incident was entered into a surviving journal rather than being preserved only through later folklore. 2 sailors were named as witnesses. They watched the figure before it disappeared beneath the water. The setting makes the account particularly intriguing because the cold northern environment rules out several animals commonly blamed for tropical mermaid sightings. Seals remain an obvious possibility. Yet the men apparently considered what they saw unusual enough to describe in human terms. Their voyage was dangerous and demanding, which may also have affected perception. Still, the report was written down at the time. Some people treat that immediacy as evidence that the witnesses were sincere. Sincerity does not guarantee accuracy, of course. What it does provide is a rare glimpse of experienced sailors confronting something they could not easily place. For a moment, a mermaid became part of an actual exploration record. Hudson's sailors described anatomical details that made their report unusually specific. The Hudson account becomes stranger when the description itself is examined. The witnesses did not simply claim that a woman appeared in the sea. They mentioned features of the upper body and gave an impression of the creature's hair. They also described the lower portion as it turned away. That degree of detail suggests they observed it for more than a fleeting instant. Skeptics point out that a seal surfacing vertically can create surprisingly human impressions under poor viewing conditions. Hair-like effects may come from wet fur or seaweed. Yet the witnesses were sailors accustomed to northern wildlife. Some people therefore wonder why a familiar animal would have confused them so completely. Another possibility is that expectation shaped what they saw. Mermaids were already part of European maritime culture. An ambiguous shape might rapidly become a recognizable creature in the mind. The real fascination lies in the confidence of the description. The journal does not read like a distant legend. It records 2 men trying to describe an animal they believed they had actually seen. English explorer John Smith became associated with a famous early mermaid sighting legend. A popular story claims that Captain John Smith once saw a mermaid and initially found her attractive before noticing her fish-like lower body. The anecdote has been repeated for generations because Smith was a famous explorer with a reputation for surviving extraordinary adventures. Yet researchers have struggled to find convincing evidence that he actually wrote the account. The tale may have been attached to his name much later. That makes the case fascinating for a different reason. It shows how easily mermaid stories can become anchored to historical celebrities. Once a respected explorer is linked with a sighting, the story gains credibility whether the source exists or not. Some people still wonder whether an original document was lost. More likely, the episode grew through retelling. Either way, the legend demonstrates one of the central problems with historical mysteries. A story can sound precise and ancient while resting on surprisingly uncertain foundations. Sometimes the mystery is not what the explorer saw. It is how the story came to exist. Colonial newspapers occasionally reported strange marine creatures with surprisingly human features. As newspapers expanded through the colonial world, unusual creature reports gained a new way to travel. A strange sighting near one coast could be printed hundreds of miles away within weeks. Readers encountered stories of marine animals with faces or movements that witnesses compared with humans. Some reports were clearly sensational. Newspapers understood that extraordinary creatures sold copies. Others quoted fishermen or local residents with little embellishment. The problem is that editors rarely had any way to investigate distant claims. A misunderstanding could therefore become permanent once it entered print. At the same time, newspapers preserve incidents that oral tradition might have lost entirely. Some people view these reports as a neglected archive of possible cryptozoological evidence. Historians treat them more cautiously because 19th century journalism often mixed fact with entertainment. Both approaches have value. Buried among obvious exaggerations are accounts from ordinary witnesses who seemed genuinely puzzled. Whether they saw seals, unusual fish, or something stranger, their testimony kept the mermaid mystery alive in an increasingly modern world. 18th century newspapers treated some mermaid sightings as legitimate pieces of maritime news. During the 18th century, readers could open a newspaper and encounter a mermaid report presented beside ordinary maritime information. Editors sometimes reproduced claims from foreign ports or coastal communities without labeling them as fiction. This reflects a world in which the boundaries of natural history remained uncertain. Explorers were still describing animals unfamiliar to European audiences. A strange creature from a distant shore therefore deserved attention even if nobody could verify it. Some reports included witness names or details about the location. Others repeated stories that had already traveled through several publications. That chain of copying makes reliability difficult to judge today. Yet the tone is often strikingly matter-of-fact. Some people argue that this suggests mermaid sightings were taken more seriously than modern readers assume. Others point out that newspapers also printed marvels and rumors for entertainment. Both things could be true at once. What remains fascinating is that mermaids briefly occupied the same informational world as ship arrivals, storms, and ordinary coastal events. A Scottish schoolmaster reported examining an alleged mermaid body during the 18th century. One remarkable Scottish account involves a schoolmaster who claimed to have examined the body of a creature believed to be a mermaid. The report is intriguing because it moves beyond a distant sighting. The witness supposedly observed the remains closely enough to comment on their unusual form. Stories of stranded sea people circulated around Scottish coasts during this period, but most lacked any surviving specimen. That absence makes modern investigation impossible. A decomposing seal or another marine mammal can appear astonishingly unfamiliar after time in the water. Such transformations may explain many reports of humanoid carcasses. Yet witnesses who handled these remains sometimes remained convinced that they had seen something extraordinary. Some people wonder whether unusual specimens were routinely buried or discarded before naturalists could examine them. Others suspect memory exaggerated the details after the event. Whatever happened, this type of account is harder to dismiss as a fleeting illusion. The witness was not watching a shape offshore. He believed the mystery was physically in front of him. The Dearness Mermaid became one of Scotland's strangest 19th century coastal encounters. In Orkney, reports of a mysterious creature near Dearness generated considerable local attention during the 19th century. Witnesses watched something appear repeatedly in the water from a distance. Descriptions varied, but the figure was often interpreted as a mermaid. Its repeated appearances made the case unusual. A single glimpse can be explained through poor visibility. A creature returning to the same general area invites closer observation. Yet distance still prevented witnesses from obtaining decisive evidence. Seals are common around Orkney and remain the most obvious explanation. Their upright posture in water can appear surprisingly human from shore. Some observers nevertheless insisted that what they saw did not behave like an ordinary seal. The story spread because multiple people had opportunities to watch it. Alternative thinkers see that repetition as evidence for an unidentified creature. Skeptics see a local animal repeatedly misinterpreted through growing expectation. Either way, the Dearness case shows how a mermaid mystery can develop in real time when an unknown shape keeps returning. Orkney witnesses described a distant creature that repeatedly returned to the same location. The recurring nature of the Orkney sightings created a natural experiment of sorts. People knew where the strange figure had appeared and could return hoping to see it again. Reports described something visible offshore that exposed enough of its body to invite comparison with a human form. Yet nobody managed to capture or identify it conclusively. This is exactly the kind of case that divides believers and skeptics. Repetition should make an ordinary animal easier to recognize. On the other hand, expectation can make a mistaken interpretation stronger with every viewing. Once the word mermaid spreads through a community, each new witness arrives prepared to see one. Some people argue that this explains the growing certainty around the creature. Others point out that local residents were familiar with common marine animals. If it were merely a seal, why did the mystery persist? The answer may be lost. What survives is a rare historical case where the unknown visitor apparently remained nearby long enough for an entire community to wonder about it. Shetland folklore preserved detailed traditions about sea people living alongside island communities. Shetland's location in the far north created a culture deeply dependent on the sea. Local folklore developed around beings that seemed to exist in parallel with human communities. Stories described sea people who possessed homes and relationships of their own. Some could appear close to human form when they came ashore. These traditions overlap with Selkie stories, although mermaid-like beings also appear. The important point is that the sea was imagined as inhabited by another society, rather than by isolated monsters. Folklorists connect these tales with Scandinavian and Celtic influences but met across the islands. Some people wonder whether memories of unfamiliar seafaring groups contributed to the idea. A stranger arriving from another coast could easily become supernatural in later storytelling. Others imagine that repeated observations of intelligent marine mammals encouraged the concept of an underwater population. There is no evidence that humanoid sea communities occupied Shetland waters. Yet the detail in the stories suggests something deeper than a simple warning about dangerous waves. The sea people had lives of their own. Hebridean stories describe captured mermaids who supposedly revealed secrets about the ocean. Some traditions from Scotland's Western Islands tell of mermaids, or sea people being captured by humans. Rather than behaving like ordinary animals, these beings sometimes spoke or communicated knowledge about the marine world. They could reveal where fish might gather or explain mysteries hidden beneath the surface. This transforms the mermaid from an object of curiosity into a source of information. Folklorists often interpret such stories as expressions of fishermen's desire to understand an unpredictable environment. A supernatural informant could explain knowledge that seemed impossible to obtain. Yet alternative readers are drawn to the idea of an intelligent species possessing information humans lacked. If such a being lived primarily underwater, even ordinary knowledge of currents and fish movements would seem extraordinary. Some people take the stories as distant echoes of encounters with unusually skilled coastal outsiders. there is no evidence that a mermaid ever provided fishing advice. Still, the motif is fascinating because it treats sea people as knowledgeable residents of a world humans could only visit briefly. A mermaid sighting near Kintyre was reportedly witnessed by multiple people at once. Cases involving several witnesses are especially attractive to mystery enthusiasts because they remove one easy explanation. A group is less likely than one person to experience the same private hallucination. Near Scotland's Kintyre coast, an alleged mermaid encounter entered local tradition after more than one observer reportedly saw the creature. The witnesses described a figure in the water with features they considered human-like. Distance and expectation still provide obvious ways for a group to misidentify the same animal. If everyone is watching one seal, they can all make the same mistake. Yet shared sightings often feel more persuasive because witnesses can compare what they saw immediately. Some people believe this makes the Kintyre report harder to dismiss. Others argue that social influence can actually increase agreement. Once one person says mermaid, everyone begins interpreting the shape through that suggestion. No specimen or clear image survived. The case therefore remains suspended between collective observation and collective error, which is exactly why it continues to fascinate. 19th century Ireland produced newspaper reports describing alleged mermaids near coastal communities. Irish newspapers occasionally carried reports of unusual beings seen near the coast during the 19th century. Some witnesses described creatures with human-like upper bodies or other features associated with mermaids. These accounts appeared during a period when journalism was becoming faster and more widely distributed. A local mystery could therefore reach readers who lived far from the original site. This publicity sometimes encouraged additional witnesses to come forward. It could also amplify rumors that would otherwise have faded. Coastal Ireland offered ideal conditions for uncertainty. Seals were common, weather could change quickly, and sightings often occurred at considerable distance. Yet local fishermen knew those waters extremely well. Some people argue that their familiarity gives unusual reports more weight. Others note that even experts can misidentify an animal under difficult conditions. The newspaper record does not settle the matter. Instead, it preserves a fascinating moment when old mermaid folklore collided with modern mass communication, allowing mysterious coastal encounters to spread farther than any village storyteller could have managed. Victorian fascination with mermaids created a market for supposed preserved specimens. The Victorian era loved natural wonders. Museums and traveling exhibitions competed to show audiences creatures from distant parts of the world. Mermaids fitted perfectly into that appetite for the extraordinary. Preserved specimens appeared in private collections and public displays, often accompanied by stories claiming they had been captured in remote seas. Many were fabricated. Skilled makers could combine fish bodies with mammal remains to produce something disturbing enough to look unfamiliar. The ugliness actually helped because a real unknown animal was not expected to resemble romantic artwork. Visitors paid to decide for themselves. Some naturalists exposed obvious frauds, but the market continued because uncertainty was profitable. Alternative thinkers raise a tantalizing possibility. If genuine unusual remains had appeared during this period, they might have been dismissed simply because so many fakes existed. There is no evidence that this happened. Still, Victorian mermaid culture created the perfect environment for truth and deception to become almost impossible to separate. Every specimen arrived already surrounded by suspicion. P.T. Barnum transformed the Fiji mermaid into an international sensation. Barnum understood that uncertainty could be more powerful than a direct claim. Instead of simply announcing that his mermaid was genuine, he created publicity that encouraged audiences to argue about it. Newspapers received stories about an extraordinary specimen supposedly brought from distant waters. Lectures and advertisements helped build anticipation before many people had even seen the object. Barnum knew the creature looked strange enough to provoke doubt, so doubt became part of the attraction. Visitors could stare at it and decide whether science had overlooked something extraordinary. This strategy made the Fiji mermaid far more influential than an ordinary museum fake. It turned the question of mermaid existence into public entertainment. Some people genuinely believed they were seeing evidence of an unknown species. Others enjoyed trying to expose the deception. Barnum benefited either way. The episode reveals an important feature of mystery culture that still exists today. People are often most fascinated when evidence seems almost convincing, but leaves just enough uncertainty for argument to continue. The Fiji mermaid looked nothing like the beautiful creature audiences expected to see. People arriving to see the famous specimen often expected the graceful figure described in popular mermaid stories. Instead, they encountered something small and grotesque. Its face looked aged and animalistic. Its upper body appeared skeletal rather than humanly attractive. That mismatch was surprisingly effective. If the object had looked exactly like a painted mermaid, it might have seemed obviously artificial. Its disturbing appearance suggested that romantic artists had simply beautified a real species. This gave promoters a clever answer to skepticism. Nature, after all, does not need to match folklore. Some observers quickly recognized that the specimen was assembled. Others found its unfamiliar form harder to explain. The case raises an interesting question about expectations. If a genuine aquatic humanoid existed, why should it resemble a beautiful human woman at all? Evolution would almost certainly produce something stranger. Alternative thinkers sometimes use that point to rethink historical sightings. Perhaps witnesses who described unattractive or animalistic mermaids were actually reporting something closer to what a real marine hominin might look like. Manufactured mermaids often combined monkey remains with fish bodies to create convincing curiosities. The construction of fake mermaids became a surprisingly sophisticated craft. Makers could attach the upper body of a small primate to the lower body of a fish. They then dried the combined remains until the joins became difficult to inspect. Teeth might be repositioned. Skin could be stretched over seams. Facial features were sometimes altered to produce something that looked neither fully human nor clearly animal. The result was effective because viewers had no real mermaid for comparison. An ugly specimen could actually seem more believable than a beautiful one. Some examples were produced in East Asia before entering European collections through sailors and traders. Once displayed in museums, their exotic origins added another layer of mystery. These objects reveal how strongly people wanted physical proof of legendary creatures. They also created a lasting problem. After convincing fakes entered circulation, every strange marine specimen became suspect. In that sense, the hoaxers may have made the mermaid mystery harder to investigate forever. Some fake mermaids became mysteries themselves because their makers and origins remain uncertain. Not every fabricated mermaid arrived with a clear history. Some specimens surfaced in private collections with little information about who created them or why. Owners occasionally inherited them without documentation. Museums sometimes received objects whose stories had already changed several times. This means researchers can identify a specimen as artificial while still knowing almost nothing about its true origin. That uncertainty creates a second mystery inside the first. Was it made for religious purposes, commercial deception, or simple curiosity? Did the creator intend anyone to believe it was real? Some specimens may have been produced decades before they became famous. Others could have traveled through several countries before reaching their final display case. Alternative thinkers sometimes wonder whether certain constructions copied earlier objects that no longer survive. If craftsmen repeatedly followed a particular body shape, perhaps they were reproducing an established tradition rather than inventing freely. There is no way to prove that idea, but these strange artifacts still carry unanswered histories of their own. European cabinets of curiosity treated fabricated sea people as objects worthy of serious attention. Before modern museums separated science from spectacle, wealthy collectors created rooms filled with unusual objects from across the world. These cabinets of curiosity might contain fossils or preserved animals beside objects whose authenticity was doubtful. Alleged mermaids fitted perfectly into that environment. A visitor could encounter one near genuine wonders that were already difficult to believe. This setting gave questionable specimens an unexpected advantage. If a narwhal tusk looked extraordinary and was real, perhaps a dried sea person might be real too. Collectors often valued rarity more than scientific certainty. An object could remain fascinating even when nobody knew exactly what it was. Some people believe this culture encouraged deliberate fraud. Others point out that it also preserved specimens that might otherwise have disappeared. The challenge for later researchers is that context was frequently lost. A fabricated mermaid could eventually be treated as folklore, art, or zoological evidence, depending on who inherited it. For centuries, the same object could move between belief and skepticism without physically changing. Mermaid hoaxes flourished because many people already believed unknown ocean species remained possible. A successful hoax usually needs an audience prepared to accept at least part of the claim. Mermaids benefited from a world in which new animals were still appearing before European eyes. Explorers returned with creatures that sounded ridiculous until specimens arrived. Sailors told stories about enormous marine animals that scholars had never examined directly. Against that background, an unknown human-like species did not seem completely impossible. Hoaxers understood this uncertainty. They rarely needed to prove that mermaids existed. They only needed to produce something strange enough that people could not dismiss it immediately. The ocean did the rest. Its size provided a perfect hiding place for anything that had not yet been catalogued. That logic still has power today. Every unusual deep-sea discovery reminds people that our knowledge remains incomplete. Of course, uncertainty is not evidence for mermaids. Yet it explains why the idea survives fraud so easily. A fake can be exposed while the larger possibility remains untouched, waiting for the next mysterious specimen. The ocean still contains vast habitats humans have observed only indirectly. Modern technology has mapped and sampled enormous areas of the sea, but direct human observation remains remarkably limited compared with the size of the environment. Deep trenches and steep continental slopes can be difficult to explore repeatedly. Vast stretches of open water may be crossed without anyone seeing what moves far below. This gap fuels mermaid speculation because an intelligent aquatic species would not need to live near beaches. It could occupy places humans rarely visit. Critics point out that large animals usually leave traces through bodies, environmental DNA, feeding patterns, or accidental capture. That makes a hidden population of human-sized creatures difficult to maintain indefinitely. Yet the ocean continually produces discoveries from places once considered well-studied. Some people therefore resist declaring any large marine mystery completely closed. The strongest case is not that mermaids must exist. It is that the sea still contains enough poorly observed space to keep extraordinary possibilities emotionally alive. Our maps are impressive, but maps are not the same as watching everything beneath them. Deep-sea exploration continues discovering animals with body plans once considered highly improbable. The deep ocean has repeatedly produced creatures that seem designed to challenge expectation. Fish with transparent heads are real. Animals survive under pressures that would crush most familiar life. Some species generate their own light or possess jaws that look almost mechanical. Every such discovery expands the range of what nature can actually build. This does not make a mermaid biologically likely. A human-like aquatic species would face major evolutionary challenges that strange fish do not. Yet supporters of cryptozoological ideas focus on a broader lesson. The ocean keeps revealing forms that once sounded fantastical. Before giant squid were photographed alive, generations knew them mostly from damaged remains and sailor accounts. That history encourages people to wonder whether other legends might contain a similar core of truth. Scientists would require physical evidence before treating mermaids seriously. Mystery enthusiasts begin somewhere else. They ask how many creatures were dismissed simply because their descriptions sounded impossible. The deep sea offers no answer, but it keeps making the question harder to ridicule completely. Rare marine animals can reach the surface briefly before disappearing from human observation. Some deep-water species spend nearly their entire lives beyond ordinary sight. They may reach the surface only when injured or disturbed by changing conditions. When that happens, witnesses can encounter an animal that looks completely unfamiliar, even to experienced sailors. The creature may then vanish before anyone gathers evidence. This pattern provides one possible framework for unusual mermaid reports. A rare animal with a rounded head or unusual posture could produce a powerful human-like impression during a brief surfacing. If the sighting lasted seconds, the witness would have little opportunity to correct the first interpretation. Such events are difficult to investigate afterward because the animal has already returned to deep water. Some people extend this idea much further. They imagine a species that deliberately avoids the surface except under unusual circumstances. That remains speculation. Still, marine biology confirms the basic problem. An animal does not need to be common near humans to exist somewhere in the ocean. Rarity alone can turn an ordinary biological encounter into a lasting mystery. Manatees are often blamed for mermaid sightings, despite looking remarkably different from women. At first glance, the manatee explanation seems almost ridiculous. These animals have broad faces, thick bodies, and paddle-shaped tails. Nobody looking at a clear photograph would mistake one for a human woman. Yet sightings at sea rarely happen under perfect conditions. Manatees sometimes rise vertically with the head and upper body visible. Their forelimbs can move in ways that resemble arms from a distance. Females also possess mammary glands located near the chest, which may have encouraged human comparisons among early sailors. The explanation becomes stronger when fatigue or glare reduces detail. Still, it cannot account for reports from regions where manatees do not live. Nor does it easily explain close sightings that include clearly human features. Some people therefore suspect that manatees explain a portion of mermaid history rather than the entire tradition. That distinction matters. A good explanation for several famous cases can become too convenient when applied everywhere. The real question is not whether manatees inspired mermaids. It is how many sightings they can reasonably explain. Dugongs may explain some sightings, yet fail to match many traditional mermaid descriptions. Dugongs belong to the same broad group of marine mammals as manatees, and they have long been connected with mermaid folklore. Their range overlaps with regions where sailors developed strong traditions about sea women. From a distant vessel, a dugong surfacing beside its young can produce an unexpectedly human impression. Early observers may also have interpreted nursing behavior through familiar human ideas. This makes dugongs one of the strongest natural candidates behind certain stories. Yet traditional descriptions frequently include features the animals do not possess. Long hair is one obvious example. Human-like faces are another. Dugongs also move in ways that experienced coastal communities would eventually recognize. Some people argue that later storytellers added attractive features after the original animal sightings. Others wonder whether dugongs became a convenient explanation because they were the closest known match. The truth may differ from case to case. What makes the dugong theory valuable is not that it solves mermaids everywhere. It shows how a real animal can generate an extraordinary story without resembling the finished legend very closely. Seals can appear surprisingly human-like when viewed upright from a distant vessel. Seals provide a particularly convincing explanation for northern mermaid sightings. When one rises vertically in the water, only the rounded head and upper body may be visible. Dark eyes and forward-facing facial features can create a fleeting resemblance to a person. Wet fur may catch the light in ways that suggest hair. If the observer is far away, the brain can fill missing detail almost instantly. This effect becomes even stronger when a witness already knows stories about sea people. Yet seals also present a challenge. Coastal fishermen who lived around them were usually very familiar with their appearance. An experienced observer might be expected to recognize one quickly. Some people use that fact to defend unexplained reports from northern waters. Others note that familiar animals can still look strange at unusual angles. The important point is that perception at sea is fragile. A few seconds of uncertain visibility can transform a known mammal into something profoundly unfamiliar, especially when the animal disappears before the viewer gets a second look. Marine mammals sometimes display social behaviors that ancient observers could interpret as intelligent. Dolphins and other marine mammals can behave in ways that feel unexpectedly personal. They may approach boats or cooperate with one another. Some species have even been observed interacting with humans without an obvious practical reason. Ancient sailors encountering such behavior had no modern framework for animal cognition. A creature that seemed curious or responsive would therefore be imagined as possessing a human-like mind. That impression may have helped shape stories about sea people who understood speech or deliberately communicated with fishermen. Intelligence does not require a human body, of course. Yet humans naturally associate familiar behavior with familiar forms. A distant animal that appeared vaguely humanoid and acted purposefully could become much more than an animal in memory. Some people believe this psychological process explains many mermaid traditions. Others reverse the argument and ask whether intelligent behavior in certain reports might have come from something genuinely unknown. There is no evidence for aquatic humanoids, but the ocean already contains minds far stranger and more sophisticated than earlier generations once suspected. Low visibility at sea can transform ordinary animals into convincing humanoid silhouettes. The ocean is an ideal environment for misidentification. Mist can erase detail while leaving only shape. Backlighting can turn an animal into a dark outline. Waves repeatedly hide parts of the body, which forces the observer to reconstruct what is missing. Under those conditions, the human brain tends to recognize familiar patterns. A rounded head above two moving flippers can suddenly resemble a person swimming. Once that interpretation forms, later details may be unconsciously fitted around it. Psychologists know that perception is not a perfect recording of reality. It is an active process of prediction. This offers a powerful explanation for distant mermaid sightings. Yet it does not automatically settle every case. Some reports involve witnesses who claimed good visibility or prolonged observation. Mystery enthusiasts focus on those exceptions. Skeptics point out that memory itself can become less reliable over time. Both sides are dealing with the same uncomfortable truth. The sea can produce visual uncertainty even when everyone involved is sincere. A witness may tell the truth and still describe something that was never really there. Long voyages can alter perception without explaining every reported mermaid encounter. Sailors on historical voyages endured conditions that could affect how they interpreted unusual sights. Sleep deprivation could become severe. Nutrition was often poor. Isolation lasted for months. The constant movement of a vessel could make distance difficult to judge. Under such circumstances, a strange shape in the water might be misread more easily than it would from a calm shoreline. This helps explain why maritime folklore contains so many extraordinary creatures. Yet the argument can become too broad. Not every mermaid report came from exhausted sailors after months at sea. Some occurred near populated coasts or involved observers who had recently left shore. Others were reported by several people under ordinary conditions. Some people therefore see fatigue as one contributor rather than a universal explanation. The point is important because mystery cases often survive by resisting a single cause. Different sightings may have completely different origins. A hallucination could explain one. A seal could explain another. What remains unexplained may then be smaller, but it does not disappear automatically. Some sightings occurred close enough that simple distance mistakes become harder to argue. The strongest mermaid reports are often those in which witnesses claimed the creature was nearby. At close range, explanations based entirely on fog or silhouette become less satisfying. Observers sometimes described faces or movements that they believed were unmistakably human-like. Of course, closeness does not guarantee accuracy. Fear can distort perception. Memory can sharpen details that were uncertain at the time. Unfamiliar animals can also look surprisingly strange when seen from an angle people rarely encounter. Still, close sightings create a different kind of puzzle from distant shapes offshore. Some people argue that these cases deserve special attention because common explanations require more assumptions. Skeptics counter that testimony without physical evidence remains weak regardless of distance. That tension lies at the center of nearly every creature mystery. A witness can sound completely sincere and provide vivid detail, yet science cannot confirm a species from description alone. The most interesting close encounters survive in this uncomfortable space where the story sounds strong, but the evidence remains frustratingly absent. Multiple witness reports challenge explanations based entirely on one person's mistaken perception. When several people report the same unusual creature, the case immediately becomes more difficult to dismiss as an individual hallucination. Groups can compare what they are seeing in real time. They may agree on movement or shape before discussing what the creature might be. That sounds persuasive. Yet groups introduce their own problems. One confident observer can influence everyone else. A suggestion shouted from one side of a boat can reshape how others interpret an ambiguous form. Human perception is social as well as visual. This means multiple witnesses strengthen some aspects of the case while weakening others. Some people believe agreement between independent observers is among the best evidence available for unexplained mermaid sightings. Skeptics look for whether the witnesses actually described the creature separately. That distinction can be impossible to recover from old reports. The fascinating point is that collective testimony does not automatically solve the mystery. Several people can observe the same real object and still disagree with science about what that object actually was. Mermaid legends often cluster around dangerous coastlines where unusual encounters were taken seriously. Many strong mermaid traditions developed in places where the sea could become dangerous with little warning. Rocky shores and powerful currents made every journey uncertain. Communities that depended on fishing paid close attention to anything unusual. A strange animal appearing near shore might therefore gain significance far beyond simple curiosity. If an encounter occurred shortly before an accident or sudden weather change, the two events could become linked in memory. Over generations, the creature might turn into a warning figure associated with danger. Folklorists often interpret mermaid stories in this practical way. They can encode respect for places where people should behave carefully. Alternative thinkers notice something else. Dangerous coastlines also contain caves or isolated inlets that receive relatively little observation. Could those settings attract unusual animals precisely because humans avoid them? There is no evidence that mermaids prefer hazardous water. Still, the geography of many legends creates an intriguing overlap. The places most likely to produce fear are also the places where unusual creatures could remain hardest to investigate. Underwater caves have inspired speculation about hidden habitats inaccessible from the surface. A coastline can look completely ordinary while concealing extensive spaces beneath the water. Caves may connect with chambers that cannot be entered safely without specialized equipment. Some systems continue for great distances underground. This has encouraged speculation about whether unknown creatures could use them as shelters. For mermaid believers, the idea is especially attractive because it solves one obvious problem. An aquatic humanoid living openly near beaches should be seen frequently. A population using submerged caves would be far harder to observe. Biology raises serious objections. Large animals require food and enough individuals to reproduce. A hidden cave population would also leave genetic or physical traces. Yet nature already uses underwater caves in surprising ways. Species can become isolated there and evolve unusual traits over long periods. Some people therefore imagine coastal caverns as possible refuges for rare marine organisms rather than mermaids specifically. The speculation remains unsupported. Even so, every unexplored passage reinforces the same irresistible thought. A coastline may contain far more hidden space than the landscape above it suggests. Submerged continental shelves once exposed enormous landscapes, now completely covered by ocean. During periods of lower sea level, huge areas that are underwater today were dry land. Coastlines extended far beyond their modern positions. Rivers crossed plains that no longer exist above the surface. Human groups almost certainly used some of these lost landscapes because people have always been drawn toward coasts and waterways. When the seas rose, evidence of their lives became harder to find. This real geological history has inspired dramatic alternative theories about mermaids. Some people imagine coastal populations becoming increasingly adapted to aquatic life as their environment changed. There is no archaeological support for such a transformation. Human communities moved as shorelines shifted. Yet the existence of drowned landscapes adds a compelling background to mermaid speculation. Entire regions familiar to prehistoric people now lie beneath water deep enough to hide settlements from casual discovery. Archaeologists are still locating traces of those vanished worlds. The mystery is not whether lost lands existed. They certainly did. The unanswered question is how much human history disappeared beneath the rising sea with them. Rising seas erased ancient coastlines where unknown human communities may once have lived. The end of the last ice age transformed the map of the world. As glaciers melted, sea levels rose and flooded places where people had lived for generations. Archaeological sites that once stood beside rivers may now lie offshore under sediment. This creates enormous gaps in our understanding of early coastal societies. Communities that depended heavily on marine resources could have developed traditions or technologies that left little evidence on land. Some alternative thinkers take this genuine problem and push it toward the mermaid mystery. They imagine highly specialized coastal groups spending so much time in water that later generations remembered them as something more than human. The idea remains speculative and lacks physical support. Yet it offers a fascinating mechanism for myth-making. A vanished people do not need to become biologically aquatic to inspire stories of sea folk. Their settlements could disappear while memories of their unusual lifestyle survived. Over centuries, ordinary human divers might become legendary water people. The sea would then preserve both their lost homes and the stories that replaced them. The aquatic ape hypothesis controversially links human traits to a partly aquatic ancestry. The aquatic ape hypothesis proposed that a significant period near water might explain certain features of the human body. Supporters pointed toward our relative lack of dense body hair and unusual control over breathing. They also discussed the way human infants respond to water. Most evolutionary scientists have rejected the hypothesis because these traits can be explained without requiring a major aquatic phase. Fossil evidence also does not reveal an amphibious chapter of human evolution. Still, the idea became enormously popular outside mainstream biology. It offers an appealing reversal of the usual story because it places water near the center of what made us human. Some people connect the hypothesis with mermaid legends, even though its original arguments did not propose fish-tailed people. They imagined that an aquatic-leaning population could have split from other ancestors. There is no evidence for that branch. Yet the theory remains fascinating because it asks whether humanity's relationship with water might be older and more biologically important than most people assume. Supporters of aquatic ancestry theories point to unusual human differences from other primates. Humans possess several traits that make us seem surprisingly comfortable in water compared with many other primates. We can voluntarily hold our breath. Some people can dive to remarkable depths after training. Our bodies also carry a substantial layer of subcutaneous fat. Advocates of aquatic ancestry theories have used such features to argue that water played a major role during human evolution. Mainstream researchers respond that each trait has plausible explanations connected with life on land. Breath control supports speech. Fat storage helps regulate energy. Swimming ability can develop culturally without requiring ancient aquatic adaptation. The debate becomes especially interesting when mermaids enter the picture. Some people ask whether these same traits could represent weak remnants of an ancestry that once spent more time in water. That possibility has not been demonstrated. Still, it creates a provocative way to reconsider ordinary human biology. Instead of asking why a hypothetical sea person resembles us, the theory asks why humans already possess several abilities that make life around water unusually possible. Mainstream researchers reject mermaid evolution, while the speculative idea continues attracting interest. Evolutionary biology offers no accepted pathway leading from known human ancestors to a hidden population of mermaids. Such a lineage should leave fossils or genetic relatives. A large marine primate would also need major anatomical changes for efficient swimming and long periods underwater. None has been documented. Yet the idea remains popular because evolution has produced dramatic transitions before. The ancestors of whales once lived on land. Over immense spans of time, their descendants became fully aquatic. Mystery enthusiasts look at that history and ask whether something similar could theoretically happen to a primate. In principle, natural selection can reshape bodies profoundly. The problem is evidence. No fossils show human relatives moving along that path. Some people nevertheless imagine an undiscovered branch that left a poor fossil record because coastal sediments were later submerged. Scientists regard that as an unsupported possibility rather than a theory. The attraction is easy to understand. Evolution proves that land mammals can return to the sea. Mermaids ask whether one branch closer to us might somehow have done the same. Some cryptozoologists propose mermaids could represent an undiscovered branch of aquatic primates. Cryptozoological speculation often begins by replacing the magical mermaid with a biological animal. Instead of a beautiful woman ending in a fishtail, imagine a marine primate shaped by millions of years in water. Its face might appear vaguely human because of shared ancestry. Its limbs could be modified for swimming. A broad lower body might be mistaken for the single tail seen in folklore when viewed from a distance. This version avoids supernatural explanations but creates enormous scientific problems. No primate is known to have become fully marine. No bones or DNA point towards such a lineage. A breeding population would also be difficult to hide. Still, supporters argue that an intelligent species might deliberately avoid boats and coastal settlements. They sometimes compare the idea with rare animals that were known locally before science documented them. Those comparisons do not prove anything. They simply keep the possibility entertaining. The cryptozoological mermaid is therefore less a traditional creature than a thought experiment about how an undiscovered marine relative of humanity might actually look. Alternative theories imagine intelligent marine hominins adapting while humans evolved on land. One particularly adventurous idea proposes that early hominins could have divided into populations that followed radically different environments. One branch remained terrestrial and eventually produced modern humans. Another supposedly moved toward a life dominated by the sea. Over immense periods, natural selection might have changed its body while preserving a recognizably human-like head or social intelligence. This scenario sounds dramatic because it creates a hidden cousin rather than a monster. Yet the evidence required would be enormous. Genetic analysis has revealed several extinct human relatives, but nothing points toward a marine lineage. Fossils also document no transition into fully aquatic anatomy. Some people respond that coastal fossil records are incomplete because ancient shorelines were flooded. That is true, but missing evidence cannot confirm the proposed species. The theory survives because it offers such an elegant explanation for mermaid folklore. Human-like appearance would come from ancestry. Aquatic behavior would come from adaptation. The missing fossils remain the decisive problem. For now, the marine hominin belongs to speculation rather than human evolution. Underwater vocalizations have occasionally inspired speculation about unknown intelligent sources beneath the sea. The ocean is filled with sound. Whales communicate across enormous distances. Ice can crack loudly underwater. Geological activity creates signals that travel far beyond their source. Before identification, some recordings have sounded so strange that people imagined enormous animals or artificial signals. Mermaid speculation sometimes enters this territory when unusual vocalizations seem patterned or almost voice-like. The difficulty is that underwater acoustics can distort familiar sounds beyond recognition. A noise recorded hundreds of miles away may bear little resemblance to the event that created it. Scientists usually solve these mysteries by comparing signals with known animals or physical processes. Yet unidentified recordings can remain puzzling for years. Some people wonder whether intelligence should be considered when a sound seems unusually structured. There is currently no reliable acoustic evidence for unknown humanoid beings in the ocean. Still, the possibility is irresistible because sound travels where cameras cannot. If something intelligent lived beyond ordinary observation, a mysterious signal might reach us long before anyone ever saw the creature that made it. Military sonar has revealed unexpected ocean phenomena before scientists understood their true causes. Modern navies spend enormous effort listening beneath the ocean surface. Sonar systems can detect objects or layers that human eyes will never see directly. During the 20th century, operators encountered signals that initially seemed mysterious. Some turned out to involve vast concentrations of marine organisms. Others reflected unusual acoustic conditions that bent sound through the water. These surprises demonstrate how complicated the underwater environment can be even for advanced technology. Conspiracy-minded discussions sometimes ask whether military systems have detected creatures never announced publicly. Secrecy surrounding naval operations makes the idea difficult to test. Governments naturally restrict information about sensor capabilities, which can make ordinary classification look mysterious. There is no credible public evidence that navies have discovered mermaids. Yet the broader possibility fascinates people because military vessels travel through regions rarely observed by civilians. If an unknown large animal crossed a sonar beam, someone might notice it before science did. Whether that information would ever become public is the part that keeps speculation alive. Unexplained sounds from the deep ocean have repeatedly generated theories about enormous creatures. Whenever researchers record a powerful, unknown sound underwater, imagination moves quickly. Several famous signals have inspired theories about animals larger than whales or creatures hidden in unexplored depths. In many cases, later analysis produced ordinary explanations involving ice or other natural processes. That pattern is useful because it shows how easily a genuine mystery can become a biological legend. The original recording is real. The extraordinary creature is the speculative part. Mermaid stories can develop through the same mechanism. A puzzling observation creates a gap, and human imagination fills that gap with something familiar enough to understand. Yet, not every ocean sound is identified immediately. Some remain uncertain because recordings are incomplete or the source was too distant. Some people find those unresolved cases irresistible. They ask whether an intelligent species could produce signals we have mistaken for background noise. No evidence currently supports that idea. Still, underwater acoustics reminds us that the ocean can reveal its mysteries without showing them. Sometimes all we receive is a sound from somewhere we cannot see. Mermaids remain unusual because similar beings appear across cultures separated by vast distances. One of the strongest reasons mermaids continue to fascinate is their remarkable cultural reach. Human-like water beings appear in traditions that developed thousands of miles apart. Their details differ enough to show that there was no single standardized story. Yet the central idea repeatedly returns. Skeptics see a straightforward explanation. Humans everywhere depend on water and naturally imagine beings that resemble themselves inhabiting it. The human mind also tends to create hybrids by combining familiar forms. Mermaids may therefore be an almost inevitable invention. Some people see the repetition as something more significant. They wonder whether separate cultures could be responding to similar encounters with real animals or forgotten coastal peoples. Cultural exchange may explain part of the pattern, especially once maritime trade expanded. It becomes harder to use for traditions that appear deeply rooted in isolated communities. No global mermaid species is required to explain the similarities. Even so, the recurrence remains one of those patterns that becomes stranger the longer you stare at it. The oldest mermaid traditions may preserve memories whose original meaning has been lost. The story can survive long after people forget why it began. Over generations, names change and supernatural elements accumulate. A real event can gradually become impossible to separate from symbolism. This makes the oldest mermaid traditions especially difficult to interpret. A tale about a water woman might have begun with an unusual animal. It could preserve the memory of a foreign visitor or a vanished local custom. It might also have been mythical from the beginning. Once centuries have passed, all three possibilities can look almost identical. Some people believe oral traditions occasionally retain fragments of genuine events across astonishing spans of time. Researchers have found examples where old stories appear to correspond with past geological changes. That does not prove mermaid legends are historical records. It does show that folklore should not always be dismissed as meaningless invention. Perhaps the strangest part of the mermaid mystery is that we may still possess the story while having completely lost the event or idea that first gave it life. After thousands of years, the possibility of unknown human-like sea life still endures. No verified mermaid body has entered a laboratory. no clear genetic sample has established an aquatic human relative. Modern zoology has never confirmed a creature matching the legends. By ordinary scientific standards, the case is simple. Mermaids remain folklore. Yet the idea refuses to disappear because the ocean itself remains so difficult to know completely. Every generation inherits old sightings and then adds new uncertainties of its own. Some people imagine an undiscovered primate. Others prefer the possibility that forgotten human communities inspired the stories. Many accept that seals or other animals explain nearly everything. None of these possibilities can recreate every historical encounter with complete confidence. That gap is where the mystery survives. Perhaps mermaids are one of humanity's longest-running misunderstandings. Perhaps they are a collection of many unrelated mysteries wearing the same name. Or perhaps some tiny piece of the legend began with something we have never identified. After millennia of stories, the sea still keeps enough of itself hidden to leave that final possibility open. Tonight, we followed the mermaid mystery across thousands of years of human imagination. We found ancient gods with fish-like forms. We heard reports from sailors who believed they had seen human-like beings rising from the sea. We explored preserved specimens, old maps, strange coastal legends, and modern attempts to explain what witnesses may really have encountered. Some of the possibilities were grounded in familiar animals. Others led us toward lost coastlines and hidden underwater habitats. A few took us much further, into ideas about unknown marine relatives of humanity and intelligent beings that may have remained beyond our reach. Perhaps mermaids are nothing more than stories shaped by distance and difficult conditions at sea. Perhaps several different animals created the same kind of legend. Or perhaps the oldest accounts preserve a small piece of something we no longer understand. For now, we can leave that question where it belongs, somewhere beyond the edge of certainty. If you enjoyed this journey, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel, or leave a thought below. And if you happen to still be awake, there is another mystery waiting for you on the screen. But there is no need to follow it just yet. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to become slower and easier. Let the last images of distant coastlines and dark water begin to fade. There is nothing left to solve tonight. The sea can keep its secrets for a little longer. And whatever may or may not be moving beneath those quiet waters, it can remain there while you rest. Sleep well, and good night.